Welcome back, guys. Kane from Garage 11, and here we are with our second episode of Behind the Build. The first one, we've got a heap of really good response, so we knew we wanted to bring you some more content, some more stuff, and some more insight into some of the bikes that we're working with. Marshall isn't going to be here today, unfortunately. He's off pulling up some sick bum whips at Park 4 today and enjoying himself out there, which is really good. So we will hopefully have him back for the next episode. But on this episode, we're going to have a look at my 1996 CR125, a bike that is super big part of the backbone of Garage 11. We'll go into a little bit more of that as we go through the episode. Really passionate about this bike, so it's really cool to bring this bike and show you what we've gone through with it. This is not a restoration, under no means is it meant to be. This is a ridden bike. It'll probably be ridden once a week, once every 2 weeks, but it'll be ridden quite a bit. So we'll go into a little bit about some of the things we didn't worry about as we're going through. But yeah, this is it, 1996 CR125.
That I wanna be friends, man. Language switch, y'all are now speaking French. I speak Dutch, yeah, I'm from the Netherlands.
So yeah, this was our sort of, like I said, everyday bike, but it sort of fell on the wayside because we sort of bought different bikes, tried doing different stuff. And we had a bit of motivation to actually fire it back up again. We've got a young dude who we're helping out and working with, Ethan. He's doing a lot of the off-road series at the moment, getting ready for Hatter, but we had some interest, he showed some interest in racing it in our vintage round. So we thought, you know what, it's a great time to pull it apart, put some time and energy into it and bring it up to speed, and it sort of became a lot more than what we thought it was going to. And it's probably a really good example of what you can sort of achieve with a little bit of aesthetics, a little bit of time, some careful placement of resources. But yeah, so this is what we sort of ended up with. It was a really cool build. The Hondas, especially mid-90s stuff, that always have a lot of interest. People love them. It was sort of that pinnacle of 90s motocross. You've got Steve Lamson, who was riding 125 HRC in the US. Jeremy McGrath, obviously 96, 5, 6, or everything up to sort of 97 for Honda, and him was really good. So they just produced amazing bikes then. This thing today is just so much fun to ride. Like, this isn't a show bike, this isn't by any means a complete restoration. It's a bike to use. We were on it yesterday and it had a blast on it. And it's sort of it's just a really good bike to ride and enjoy and have fun on. And you look at what those guys, you know, compared to a modern 125 now, it obviously doesn't have the same sort of speed that they do, but with the way we've got this handling and everything like that, it's crazy. And there's always some iconic shots of Lamson on one of the 96 CR125s, especially in Jerez, Spain for the MX of Nations that year, jumping that massive step up. It's just wild, you know, and it's just a real testament to what these bikes can do. But cool, let's have a look at this one. This is it. We've sort of got it to a really nice point. And yeah, we've put a lot of good time and resources into it in the right areas. So I guess we'll sort of start with the forks. We'll start at the front and work our way back. So the forks we did on this, some guys call it sacrilege, some guys don't, but we converted it to a 47mm twin chamber front end. Did that a little while ago. It's out of an 06 CRF, and it was pretty cool because in 96, or those early years, 95, 6, I think it was, that HRC were actually running a twin chamber fork in their bike. So it really suits the aesthetic of the bike, and it actually works really well from a rideability point of view. The bike stayed super balanced because it was set up really well. We've done on the front end of this just basic service and revalve, sprung it for the weight that we needed to. We've got our Kashima Replica anodized uppers on it, tie nitrate lowers, our hydroblasted the fork lower lugs just to clean it all up and just give it make them look really, really special. And yeah, they work really well. So it was really good to sort of add that little bit of a modern touch and just a little bit more adjustability to an older bike, especially because the chassis does lend itself to that front end so well, which was super cool. Triple clamps are just stock for that year, 06 triple clamps. We'd like to look at trying to get the HRC Replica billet ones for it, because I think that from a visual point of view, that would really add a bit of a key to it as well. So yeah, we'll see how we can go with sort of chasing those up. Wheels, we just did a States MX wheel set. They've been on the bike from when I very first started mucking around with it. It did have red anodized hubs, so we went away from those. We actually stripped all of the wheels apart and worked into Cerakoting them. So we did that all in-house, which is really good. We've got the ability to do that. And I think the dark grey really just added a really nice key visual component to the wheels. Relaced them back up. On the front, we've got a Doc Wob Replica HRC front end. So that's a 270mm rotor. So we really wanted to try and work within this bike, little bits and pieces that HRC, my passion is works bikes. I love them from the 90s, Kawasaki's, the Hondas mainly. So it's cool to have little bits and pieces. I mean, I toyed up with the idea of do we chase original, parts, works parts for it, but because we're going to be putting a lot of hours on this bike, we're going to be enjoying it, riding it, and the cost involved of works parts at the moment is astronomical. So we sort of opted to go away from that side of it. But yeah, Doc Wob, he does a lot of cool replica stuff, key stuff for them, and the braking discs are one of them. So it's a huge disc, probably a lot of disc for not a lot of engine, but that's okay. It's always good to have that control there. But yeah, so that was sort of what we tried to do with the front end. Standard 7/8 bars on it, which are traditional for that period of time. They also give you a little bit less rigidity in the front end. Guys say that the twin walls can be a little harsh as you're going through, they don't flex as much. So we opted to go with just a fairly neutral Renthal 7/8 bar on there. Rebuilt all the brakes, which we do quite regularly with this sort of stuff. Pull them all apart, zinc plate a lot of the hardware that we didn't want to replace or didn't need replacing, so it looked nice and fresh. Hydroblasted the front caliper, really cleaned it up. Hydroblasting, as we all know, is a fantastic process for restoring a lot of different materials back to a really nice finish and sheen. Aluminium, sand cast aluminium and die cast aluminium, it works really well with. As you can see, the results are really, really nice. So we rebuilt the front caliper. The hanger was obviously came with the kit, with the oversized kit. So that's a really nice works anodized color. Popped the front master cylinder apart as well. Now, we wanted to get as much feeling in the front brake as we could. So we wanted to move away from the original hose that was on it because they do have a lot of flex in them. You get a mushy feeling in that front brake. So we got in contact with the guys at John Stamnus. They're amazing. They've got a huge back catalogue of templates for hoses for all sorts of different bikes, road, off-road, and they do a really nice braided hose for this particular bike. So we hit them up and they were able to supply us with one of those. So that really gave a really strong and accurate feeling to the front brake system. Front brake is lethal on this thing. And that's what we wanted to achieve. So we definitely achieved it. Now, the tank, we're gonna sort of move through in this section here. The tank was quite badly yellowed. Now, we didn't get it as good as we could have gotten it, but we're working on different processes and different things to try and bring you guys a whitening process for it, for yellowed white tanks. So this was a little bit of an early experimentation. So we got it a lot better than what we thought we would get it, but I think there's definitely room for growth in that. So we're onto something at the moment, so we might bring you guys a little how-to video if we have a bit of success with this one that we've got coming up. So that should be pretty good. But we wanted to go for a slightly different aesthetic than what you would usually see, but still continue with a works replica looking bike. Throttle Jockey recently re-released the 96 MX of Nations kit. So we went in there, we thought that would probably be a really good point of difference from the norm, but still have that HRC look about it. And I think it worked really, really well because it's the same general physical look, just obviously the USA color scheme on it. So that was really cool. So yeah, that was one aspect that we wanted to try and hit. And like I said, something I'm super passionate about is works bikes. So yeah, for me personally, Marshall's obviously very different. But for me personally, I believe there's two ways a bike should look. That's how the factory wanted it or how the team wanted it. So if we can sort of stick within that was sort of my brief within my mind for this one here. So yeah, we had the frame done, was powder coated a couple of years ago actually, and it's held up really well. So like I said, this was a time critical build to get it to the first or the event that we wanted to race it at. So we really had to be fairly strategic where we put our energy. We looked at the frame and it really was in quite good condition. Powder coat's really resilient and it's good because you can attack it with a cut and polish compound and it will bring that luster back to it. So we were able to just go through, once we had stripped a fair bit of the bike away, we were able to go through and just detail the frame to bring it back up to what we wanted it to be when it was first powder coated, which in all honesty wasn't that long ago, but the bike had seen some hours since it had been powder coated. So it was a good chance to sort of just go through and really just go through and detail it, which is kind of cathartic as well, to sort of sit there and just start to really become more intimate with the bike and strip it back, which is a good way to sort of check for any damage as well. A lot of, coming from a race team, we used to spend a lot of time cleaning, and cleaning is the perfect way to, not just washing the bike, but actually cleaning your components as you pull them apart. It's a really good way to inspect. So it has a very prominent purpose within bike maintenance. So we sort of went through, checked all the frame over, and that seemed to be pretty good. Now, the engine, we'd rebuilt that and it hadn't done a lot of hours. So we made the call to leave the engine in and see where we were how it was gonna run once we got it together. I knew it run and I knew it was pretty strong last time we'd ridden it. So like I said, we elected to leave it in there. Worst case scenario, if we'd had any issues, we could pull the top end off, or worst case, a couple of all-nighters and some parts. We could probably have rebuilt the engine if it got really time critical. But we were lucky. It survived and it's running really strong. So we were really lucky with that. Like I said, we were sort of putting our resources and our time into key areas. And a big visual part of any two-stroke is obviously the expansion chamber. Now, we looked at trying to get another pipe for it, but they generally take a long time. Availability for these older frames is really hard to sort of pick up stuff. It already had an FMF pipe on it, but it was a nickel-coated one. And we wanted to move away from that nickel because, like I said, for me, works finish is always my favourite finish. So we got it straight down to Paul at Prime Pipe Works, and I think, we've spoken about Paul and his work previously, and it's just what he does, he's a wizard, and I believe that what we do here, it's not about what we can do and how much we can do, it's about who we also get to help us out as a business as well. We like to align ourselves with really competent, strong and passionate companies to help with what we do, because we can't do everything. And if we tried, we'd do everything, but not as good as it could be. So Paul is definitely a good example. Whenever a pipe comes in, it goes straight to him and he knows exactly what needs to be done to it, whether we're chasing an OEM restoration, whether we're chasing a refurbish on a works pipe, whether something needs, it's been crushed or dented or has some major damage in it. He's definitely the man to go to, and he can pull it apart, cut it open, fix it, repair it, and generally comes out 100% perfect all the time. So as you can see here, we gave it to him. We said, look, we just want a works finish on it just to help with the visual on this. And he stripped the nickel off, fixed a few little bits with it, refinished it, and it came out looking amazing. We all know that works pipes they wear out and they become pretty tatty very quickly because they are a raw finish. So they're not really designed for long term. You remember, these are race bikes. They're good for 12 months. And that's the bottom line with a lot of these sorts of parts. So what we did is Cerakote do a clear Cerakote, but it's not, we sort of like to push some of these products and see on our own stuff what the failure rate is and what they're meant to do and what they'll put up with. Now, clear Cerakote themselves say that they're not heat rated. Okay, cool. So let's put it on. Let's see what the failure is going to be, if any. Now, Ethan's ridden this thing and he can obviously ride it on the button a lot more than I can. And the front of this pipe is still looking amazing. The clear Cerakote has held up, even with those bigger exhaust temperatures, especially at the barrel, which well exceed what Cerakotes say they should put up with. So I think that's a big testament to the Cerakote product and what it can do. We don't guarantee it, but it definitely has held up so far. And that's helped us preserve the look of the pipe and hopefully preserve it for a lot longer than it normally would. So yeah, that was a really key visual element that we wanted to go with. Unfortunately for this one, we've had to use aftermarket radiators. We always like to use OEM radiators where we can because the fit is way better than anything that's on the market at the moment. We had to use these ones because 96 CR125 radiators are pretty thin on the ground. So we just stuck with an aftermarket radiator. Fit wasn't the best, but it definitely wasn't bad either. So we had to use what we had to use. And like I said, this is not a complete restoration. This is a bike that's going to get used. People are going to enjoy it. We're going to have fun with it. So we had to make compromises. And I think we've spoken about compromises with parts in the past as well. There is always compromise with anything. Restorations are never ever going to be 100% as they were because these bikes are getting older. So we do the best with what we have. So yeah, so there we go. That's the pipe side of things. We're running the FMF muffler on it at the moment, which obviously you can't see because it's just in here. But we are actually developing Garage 11 carbon mufflers at the moment. I've just seen the first couple of prototype photos and they look absolutely unreal. So they're going to be very traditional, stinger tipped carbon mufflers for a lot of these older bikes, newer bikes, whatever we can get templates for, we'll be making them for. So keep an eye out for those, and this one will definitely be running one, and it'll be our test mule for that particular product. So that'll be really cool. So where are we? So yeah, so with the engine, we decided to leave it in. We popped all of the inner, outer clutch covers, the water pump covers off, because we wanted to give it a little bit more of a neutral works finish and refreshen some of them. So once again, we've used the Cerakote product to come up with a colour that we really liked. We mixed up a custom colour for water pump, clutch cover, and the ignition cover. So we got the Boysen covers on there, we stripped them back, and then recoated them, and then obviously exposed the lettering on them, which always gives a really cool finish to that particular product. I'm a sucker for titanium. I think there's three of the most amazing materials on this earth: the titanium, carbon, and magnesium. And that's very, very works. I think those materials are just absolutely stunning. And I think it would actually be pretty cool to get Dr. Andrew back in and have a chat, because he knows a lot of the technical side of those three particular materials. So it'd be cool to give him an explanation of not only visually why we use them, but from a mechanical and a performance point of view, why they're amazing as well. So we used as little titanium fasters where we could and where we could afford to. The radiator hoses on these always ran really close to the exhaust, so we've put the heat sheath over them to try and just help insulate them from any sort of heat damage that might occur. Race bikes and race cars are all about preventative failures, so you really want to try and look ahead at what could go wrong and then prevent it as much as you can. And a big thing is, when we used to work in race teams, it was, could it rub against it? Yes or no. If it can, is it hot enough that you can tie it to it? Then tie it to it. Is it too hot but you can't change it? Insulate it. So that's what we did here. Just a little bit of preventative failure maintenance there. Kickstart was the original kickstart. We used our prime finishing wheels to refinish that and give it that really amazing finish. Those wheels are an absolute necessity for any restoration that's going on because they are so versatile, and the finish they give you is really, really incredible. So yeah, that sort of tidied up the engine a little bit. Like I said, we were obviously checking bearings and stuff as we had a lot of those covers apart. We sort of, we knew the top end was going to be as healthy as it could be. and worst case, we were going to have to rebuild it. So yeah, that's sort of where we got to with the engine side of it. Rear shock was pretty cool actually. We pulled it all apart. It's a standard OEM shock that's in it. We Cerakoted the shock body to match that works finish. So we used the burnt bronze on that one. New components in it, new seals, bearings, all that stuff to make sure it's fresh. And we actually changed the piston in it to a piston that was given to us by a really good friend of ours who's quite big in automotive car racing in the suspension side of things. And it was the same inner shock body diameter, the piston diameter that we needed, and it had a really unique component to it, which I'm probably not going to go into a great deal of detail. But what we did is Ethan's got a massive knowledge on suspension setups and has spent a lot of time within the off-road motorcycle community doing a lot of suspension stuff. So we gave him the shock and said, here dude, you're going to sit on it. This is the piston I think we should run. Come up with a valving stack for it and let's test it. Let's use this opportunity to see what it does. And all I can say is all the feedback we've gotten, it's unreal. So we're going to keep doing a little bit more testing on a more modern bike with it as well. And hopefully we can give a really good feedback on that one. So that should be really cool. IMS foot pegs, because the original foot pegs, you just slide all over the place with them. So we opted to put IMS pegs on it and they hold up really well. Carby, now that was a pretty cool one. We've got a PWK air striker on it. And that, once we jetted it, we came up with a bit of a jetting spec that we thought would work. We put it in as a baseline and we were so close it wasn't funny, just a pilot jet change. And the power delivery that this thing has is just, it's so smooth, it's so linear, it's just unreal. And it just revs, there's no fluffiness to it, there's no over rev on deacceleration, it's just amazing. Now a lot of guys, we're actually going to try and get a hold of Electron carburetor as well to put on there, whether it be their H series or the new Billetron. And no, the Electron, Air Striker, traditional carby is a fairly polarizing topic of conversation for a lot of people. We're open to a lot of different things. So we want to know why. We know that this works really well. So we know we've got a really good baseline, a really good setup with the Air Striker in it. So we're going to try and pull that out, put the Electron in and back to back it. Because we've spent a little bit of time with Electrons in the past with a lot of our other personal bikes. Marshall's got Electron, I think, on every single carbureted bike he has. And he spent a fair bit of time tuning them. So it's going to be really interesting to back it, you know, literally take the carby out with us into the field, ride one, get it hot, do some laps on this, and then literally change it over and then back it the same day. So we can get some really reliable, quick feedback on it. I don't think that there's anything wrong with Electron. I don't think there's anything wrong with an Air Striker. Like I said, this thing's running absolutely unreal. And some people might say, why would you change it? But why wouldn't you? Let's see what else we can do. Let's see what else is out there. The Electron might give us more power in different areas that we're looking for. So we're definitely we're definitely open to sort of doing that. So that'll probably be the next little development we're going to try and do with it. Now we've got it running as well, we're probably going to have a look at trying to adjust the compression ratio on it and the squish band. Because we run all of our two-strokes on ELF race fuels, they make a fantastic product, and I run my four-stroke stuff on them, we run all the two-stroke stuff on them, and it's the cheapest performance upgrade you can do to any off-road motorcycle or any vehicle for that matter is running it on a good quality fuel. It is a little bit more expensive than your average pump fuel, but it's not as expensive as some other race fuels that are on the market. And for the amount of riding a lot of people do, it's not that much when you consider what a pipe would cost, or you know what a head would cost, or reeds would cost, or any of that sort of stuff. So this is running on the ELF 102 at the moment, and we have fantastic results with it. And that affords us the ability to be able to up the compression and play around with the squish, because we've got the octane there to hold onto it. So we possibly won't have as many failures or any failures at all when we're trying to do that sort of stuff, if we're doing it with a fairly calculated mindset. So that'll be pretty cool. I think that's going to be something that'll that'll help liven this thing up. I mean, we've got the rider to ride it competitively, so it'd be interesting to see what it would be like going up against modern two-strokes, 125s obviously. It's a weight for weight, it's about the same as a KTM, a new KTM 125. The suspension, obviously, suspension is where we want it for this chassis, so we believe it turns on a dime, it does everything it needs to. Engine is where it lacks, big time. I think we're 7 horse down back to back if this was brand new in 96 to a brand new bike. If we could try and alleviate some of that deficit, we might be in with a shot at being competitive to a level, and it'd be a pretty cool, it's sort of our big long-term goal with this bike is to see how competitive we. So yeah, like I said, moving back through the bike, the swing arm, that was pretty tired when we got it, and it had been pretty tired for a long time. I'm not gonna lie to you, we didn't put a great deal of effort into this swing arm because we knew it was gonna ride, time was critical. Literally pulled it out of the bike. It had already had new bearings put in it that had very little hours, so we knew we didn't have to replace those. Punched all the bearings out of it, got it in the acid solution to strip all the factory anodizing off of it. Let that sit for a couple of days, rinsed it off, sandblasted it, rinsed it again, threw it in our Raptor Hydroblaster, and as we know, that's just a magic cabinet. We literally just went through and refinished it all as best as we could. We weren't super critical on welding up dents and dents, obviously cracks, but there was none. Dents and scratches, I mean. Because we knew it was going to get ridden, and there wasn't a huge amount in key visual areas. So we pulled it out and then re-linished the sides of the spars just to give them that that factory look back again. And then once again, clear Cerakote because it helps really preserve a lot of this stuff. It helps resist stains and all that sort of thing. So we went through and we clear Cerakoted all the swing arm. Same with the linkages, same process, literally. With the linkages, we jumped back on after we had hydroblasted them. We got the prime finishing wheels onto them, which help refinish a lot of the cracks and dents and scratches that occur in that area over the years. And the prime products they're the only products we really use and recommend for doing that sort of stuff because they are so good and so versatile. Clear Cerakoted them, punched all the bearings back into them, and then refitted the rear end. Same rear brake, we sort of gave it the same treatment as the front. Pulled it all apart. It had been rebuilt previously, so it was well within its service life. The rear master cylinder, we had a few little dramas with one of them, so we swapped them out. We just couldn't get a decent pedal out of it. Oh, it couldn't get a pedal at all, really. We hydroblasted the brake pedal and then re-zinc plated the tip. Now that's a cool little one for you if you are looking at trying to refurb brake pedals, because a lot of these are actually pinned together and they're riveted together, from the factory. So once you unrivet them, it's really hard to get them back. But what you can do, zinc plating won't adhere to aluminium, as well as what it will adhere to steel. And it flakes off. So what you can do, if you've got the patience and you run your own little zinc plating bath like we do here, you can hydroblast it all as you would, clean it all, and you literally just hold the tip in the zinc bath and zinc plate it. Then what you can do is once you've got a really nice zinc finish on it, the zinc will then flake off the aluminium that's around it, leaving you with a zinc plated tip. So that's a really cool little point that you can do to be able to refurbish your brake tips and your brake pedals, because sometimes they can look a little shabby. So yeah, there we go. We rebuilt the rear caliper, put the hanger on. I think we're going to go back to Doc and get a HRC Replica rear caliper for this thing. Just because we can, just so it matches the front. Like I said, the work stuff is a big passion of mine, so it'd be cool to have that on there. And I know when Ethan's swinging off it, he likes using his rear brake a little bit, so it'd be good to give him a little bit more performance in that area. Pirelli tyres, front and rear. We really like the Pirelli tyres. They give us really good hold up. They're really good longevity with the smaller bore stuff. So that's really good. Once again, relaced, re-anodized the rear hub, and then, yeah, got that side of things done. John Stamnus helped us out again with the rear brake. We wanted to match the rear brake with a braided rear line as well. Obviously looking for performance, given the fact that we're wanting to race this quite competitively. So the rear brake line needed a braided line in it to give that really good, concise feeling in the rear brake to match the front. And then we wanted to get some tricky parts for the other side. We wanted to get some tricky parts where we could, and carbon's a little thin on the ground for a lot of these things. There's a company that does a few little carbon bits for them, and we wanted to really add that carbon element to the bike. I reckon it is a really cool visual thing. And, you know, performance, yeah, whatever. Like, sometimes it's about the looks as well. Now, we got the carbon chain guide for it, and we weren't overly wrapped. Well, not wrapped, but it definitely wasn't what we wanted it to be. So what we did is we overlaid the original guard, or the original chain guide. We grabbed the pattern from that and traced it out onto the carbon bit, and then cut the holes into it, which I think gave it a lot more of an interesting visual look, which was something that we really wanted to do, because I think the chain guide needs it. Having solid chain guides just, to me, doesn't look right. So that's what we did. Titanium bolts holding that in, got to have carbon, got to match it with titanium, in my opinion. And we also used the chain protector up the front, the case saver. We got a carbon one of those as well, which is just a really cool little highlight in that area of the bike, because there's not a lot going on in there. This side has the pipe, so it really needed something interesting on that side. So yeah, that was sort of where we got to with this. And then obviously we got it together, it looked great, and we were sort of, like I said, really worried what it was going to actually go like. And then once we got it out, a few little teething issues, but it was just wild. It was so much fun, and we had such a good initial start with it, and it's just that momentum has kept going with its performance. It surprised us a lot more than I think it was going to, which was super cool, because it's really good to see a lot of these older bikes back out. We do a lot of bikes for guys and that don't get ridden, and that's totally fine. A lot of money goes into the big OEM restorations, and once it's there, it's only going to be that level once. So this is why we were sort of a little bit cautious with this one, because we knew we wanted to ride it. We wanted to get it out there and spend time on it and enjoy it, which is another aspect as well. So we were not that precious with it. We just knew we needed it to get it to where we needed it to be. And obviously the aesthetic side of it is a big thing, but we also needed the performance side of it. So getting the suspension dialed was key, getting the brakes working was key, and then getting the power delivery to it was key. Like I said, there's a few little things that I think we're going to look at trying to do now with it. With the V-Force reeds, I think it's going to need something to sort of clean it up. The carb, it'd be cool to do testing on that. We'll be able to bring you, like if we do that, we'll be able to bring you a really good little insight video into what we're going to be doing with that. And some of the head design as well. These bikes, it's all been done before. We could quite easily buy a head off the shelf and go for it. But part of the fun and the learning experience is doing that stuff yourself and running those theories yourself and doing those calculations yourself. So that's why this bike's always been that bike. It's always been a learning bike for us. In the early days, it was learning Cerakoting, it was experimenting with that side of things. Now it's getting more in depth with the science of engines and what goes on in there, and the suspension side of things. It's really just been, this has been the biggest part of Garage 11 for me as a personal project as well, to learn and understand it and work with it. And it's definitely served that purpose. We'll throw up some photos of what it looked like before we started to get it to this, and then what it looked like when we very first got it. And the crazy thing is, when we first got this bike, it was in Adelaide, where my parents live. It was early 2019, I think, or 2018. Paid like $1,200 for it, and we sat on it for a week. We thought, no, do we really want it? Yes or no? And now, you know, that's unheard of, considering, you know, obviously what the market went through for a lot of these bikes, especially the Hondas. And it's just a super special bike for us. It's a very, you know, I've got a lot of passion for it and I love it. And it's 90s. It's so quintessential 90s motocross, it's not even funny. And love them or hate them, or if you do something different, that's fine, but it's definitely one of those bikes that really holds, a lot of interest for a lot of people. So it was sort of good to get it out and get it up to speed again and get it back out there on the track. It was really cool. So it'd be good to sort of, over the years, we've got a few things. I know 834 Moto Builds in the US, he does some really good replica bash plates and other bits for this. So we're probably going to hook in with him and grab one of those. So I think it needs a bash plate. We want to try and get the water pump, the factory looking water pump cover on it as well, which is good protection, but it also is another visual element, I think, when you're looking at these HRC bikes. But yeah, like I said, a lot of these early Hondas, they're interchangeable as well. They're so wildly interchangeable, it's not funny. Honda kept a lot of the similar parts through a lot of years, and probably further than you would think. So they're probably one of the best bikes to restore as well. There's so many parts available, reproduction parts available, so that a lot of people can get into it. Not just those that have the money to do nothing but OEM, but guys who want to keep them going and ride them and enjoy them. You can get airboxes, you can get tanks, you can get all sorts of stuff for them. It's amazing. These bikes are just the backbone, I think, of the restoration community globally, and they're so wildly recognizable throughout all sorts of motorcycling communities, especially when you see them, in the Honda colors that were that year. Your nuclear reds, Uranus purples, all that sort of stuff. It will never be replicated. You will never see manufacturers going into this detail and having these wild designs now, and you'll never replicate this era again. So that's why these bikes are so special. The Hondas, the Cowies, the Suzis, all those bikes, they just won't ever be that again from a visual point of view. Performance, they're totally different motorcycles, totally different world. But I think visually they just bring up so many cool feelings and vibes and excitement when you see them. And when you see those colors done right, it transports you to another place. It just brings back feelings and memories and all that sort of stuff that you're just not getting today. And you won't ever get them again. And that's why this bike in particular is so special to me, to our business. And the bike, 96 Hondas and 5s and 4s and all that generation are special to the wider vintage motocross community and the modern motocross community as well. Because they are, everyone who sees them, whether you're interested in them or not, is always drawn to them because they are so widely unique and really out there from a design point of view. It's really a shame a lot of the manufacturers aren't in that space anymore, but at the same time, times have changed. It's not the 90s anymore. As much as we all wish it was, I wish it was, it's not. So things have changed, and that's why things like this and other restorations are so special within this community, because it keeps the next generation interested as well. If we don't have the next generation interested in it, we don't have any growth within the vintage motocross community. So it's really good that they are accessible for people to restore and fairly easily as well. And not take away from how complicated it is to restore a motocross bike, but it's a lot more accessible than some of the other bikes, especially if you're looking at 80s motocross, 70s motocross. Those bikes get really wildly expensive and complicated at any level to restore. So that's our 1996 Honda CR125. You'll see it around. We're going to do a lot more stuff with it. We're going to do a lot more development with it. And I think it's really a good bike for us to work with. And yeah, it's super fun. It's probably one of the best motorcycles I've ever ridden. I'm not a fast rider, I don't have to be. So for me, it's about the feeling and the enjoyment that it brings. And this definitely brings up a lot of good feelings and a lot of enjoyment. You're not traveling fast, but man, it sounds like you are, and that's all that matters in my opinion. So yeah, all right guys, my name's Kane. Thank you for coming through for another episode of Behind the Build. We'll have Marshall with us again next time, which will be really good. And we'll hopefully try and bring you something a little bit more different again. If you've got any ideas or feedback, if you've got any bikes yourself that you think might be worth featuring, let us know, get in contact, hit up the website, Instagram, Facebook, however you want to. All of the links to those platforms are in the description of the video. Reach out, say hello if you've got any feedback for us as well. We're always about the growth of it. Really good feedback, positive, negative, let us know. All feedback is good feedback. All right guys, my name's Kane. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Behind the Build, and hopefully be able to bring you something really cool next time. All right guys, thank you very much. See ya.
Mm-hmm.